Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dick Lavine. I'm the very senior fiscal analyst at every Texan. And I'd like to thank Mr. Chairman, your staff did give me the committee sub yesterday afternoon, so it gave me a chance to digest it. I didn't get to see the end of the Masters, but I still appreciate it. In my mind, this is HB 5, the committee sub for HB 5, and I'm testifying against, is like 313, except with fewer jobs, lower wages, less accountability and transparency, and it's more expensive. So starting with the jobs, I'm looking at the middle tier, the vast majority of the state that is counties more than 25,000 and excluding those 10 counties that are more than 750,000. Only 20 jobs are required. That's less than the 25 that are required for most of the non-renewable projects under 313. Plus you get to prorate over 10 years your construction jobs. Plus you get to count your independent contractors. That is pretty minimal job creation when you get to aggregate all those together. The average wage that's required is only the wage for all jobs in the county. That includes McDonald's, that includes Starbucks. If we are giving benefits to these companies, we should be asking for wages better than are already existing in the county. At least in 313, at least for the minimum required number of jobs, it was compared to manufacturing wages, which of course are much higher than the average of all jobs. And just a small note that in the biennial report the legislature contemplated in this bill, wages aren't even mentioned. Just shows you the lack of emphasis on what in the preamble they say the intent is to create good paying jobs. I don't see it in this bill. Now, as for accountability and transparency, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, there's no audit. Now, the audit under 313 was not very effective, but we know that the enterprise fund does do a good audit, and they do check on the number of jobs created and the wages paid. It is not that difficult. That information is available to the state and should be required in this bill. Secondly, if you looked at the first pass that the school district has on an application, they have 7 days to turn it around. The bill says they shall send it to the controller. It's really just a ministerial function. There's, as far as I can tell, no need for hearing, no need for a vote. They're just the way station to prevent constitutional problems, as was explained by a prior witness. And then when it does come back to the school district for final approval, they have a 35-day window in which to do it. I think they ought to have at least a 30-day minimum notice to the public before an open hearing on this. So the public will have a chance to see what this proposed project is and how it might affect their community. Well, you can't do that in a 35-day window. And also, from a few of these applications that I followed closely, sometimes there's a first hearing and then a second hearing and a third hearing. You can't do that when you have to squeeze it through 35 days. So that's much less opportunity for public input. And then finally, I said it was more expensive. That's because, I don't know who thought this was simple, but under that proposal where you take the greater of A compared to the lesser of B and C, for most of these projects, that works out to $14 million in taxable value. That's compared to $60 or $80 million for most projects under 313. Only the renewables had much lower than that, and of course they aren't in this bill any longer. So when you multiply that out, this is about, and you include the increasing number of projects that are eligible compared to 313, it is bound to be more expensive. In fact, while I'm on it, let me mention, Mr. Chairman,
if we could wrap it up, that would be great, Mr.
Right.
Thank you.
We need a meaningful fiscal note. The fiscal notes on the 313 bills that came out of this committee last session were 10-year projections and really did a good job of trying to estimate future cost. Obviously, the fiscal note on the bill is filed, had no substance, but you should not let this out of committee without a good fiscal note and also a tax equity note, because we know under 313, half the benefits went out of state and half of the in-state benefits went to those few families with incomes over $165,000. The LBB has testified earlier in front of this committee that they can do that kind of analysis. I think it's important. I think it would help inform the public, and I think you should require that. Two more quick things, which is there is no sunset provision in this bill. We wouldn't even be here if not for the sunset provisions in 313. And once this passes with no sunset, there's no incentive for anybody to ever come back. That is just a mandatory provision that I think you should have. And last, it still has the same minimal A determining factor, which could be anything. We should limit these incentives to where they really make a difference, to when the project will not come to the state if they do not get this incentive. You don't get this in this bill. All you get is that minimal A determining factor, or in the preamble it says would likely locate elsewhere if not for the incentive. That's just a simple preponderance of the evidence, the lowest burden you could possibly have. So that's what I have. I'll be happy to discuss in detail with any of the committee members now or later.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Sure. Chair recognizes Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lavine. Just a couple quick questions following up on what you just testified to. You said that you think that the bill will lead to more projects being eligible than under Chapter 313. Is that right?
Well, you know, no, because the renewables were about 2/3 of 313. So in just raw count of projects, I'm probably wrong. In terms of the taxable value lost under this HB 5, I assume is going to be much greater.
Okay, so
313.
as well, you said that it will cost more or cost more of the state
Yes.
than 313 did. So even though renewables are not in this bill, at least as it is right now, you think that the criteria is looser so that it will, I just want to understand why it's going to cost more when you have.
Well, two things, because the characteristic, the nature of the projects that are eligible is much broader than under 313, except of course for renewables. And then the value at which they are taxed, that 14 million for most projects, is significantly below what they're taxed under 313.
So 14 million under this bill, and then you said, what'd you say, 80 million on 313?
Yeah, well, you know, there were 10 tiers under 313, but a lot of them were 60 or 80 million.
Okay. And then with respect to, I want to go back to the type of projects though, even though renewables are out, at least as of right now, you think that there's projects that currently don't qualify that would qualify under this? Is that just because of the lower dollar value, or is there another factor?
No, because of the list. And in fact, the chairman, right in the beginning for the first witness, went through a number of those natural gas storage, is what I remember, and a few others that are not currently eligible under 313, probably very clearly would come to the state without an incentive, but they would get one under this bill.
Got it. Okay. I just want to make sure I understood exactly what you were referring to there. Okay. And then the last point you made about the language says a determining factor in terms of the location of the project. So you don't see the language in this bill as being tighter or more prescriptive than what we had under Chapter 313?
It's identical.
Okay. So there's no changes with respect to really trying to hone in on the projects that would not come here were it not for this incentive. This is the same, in your opinion, this is the same regimen as we have.
It's exactly the same, a determining factor. So the weakness of 313 would be carried right over into House Bill 5.
All right, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.